Today's daily lectionary reading from the Gospel of Mark touches on a familiar story that we also read in both Matthew and Luke. It concerns a brief episode in which Jesus returns to his hometown of Nazareth in the hills southwest of the Sea of Galilee and teaches in his home synagogue. As a minister, I've preached in my home church, as has nearly every other preacher in Christendom. But most of us have never had quite the hostile reception Jesus received in his home synagogue. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Tuesday, January 24th, 2023. Luke's version of this story is much more detailed than the versions in either Matthew or Mark. These two Gospels record only the bare minimum of detail, while Luke goes into what passage Jesus read and what he said to the crowd, and the fact that the crowd was so hostile that they tried to throw him off a cliff to his death. For as dramatic an encounter as this is, it is curious that both Matthew and Mark exclude this detail. But there may be a good reason for it. Both Matthew and Mark don't want the focus to be on this violent reaction, but rather on another, more subtle but telling detail. Mark's version reads, Jesus left that place and came to his hometown, and his disciples followed him. On the Sabbath, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astounded. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What is this wisdom that has been given to him? What deeds of power are being done by his hands? Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and brother of James and Joseph and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Then Jesus said to them, "Prophets are not without honor, except in their hometown, and among their own kin, and in their own house." And he could do no deed of power there, except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and cured them. And he was amazed at their unbelief. Call it the curse of the familiar. These days, we jokingly say that an expert is anyone with a briefcase who lives more than 50 miles away, someone unknown to us. With people whom we do not know, we have this strange ability to imagine that they are somehow smarter, better, more capable than we are. But if we know them, we have this terrible tendency to discount their abilities. Perhaps this is part of the reason why the people in Jesus' home synagogue respond so negatively to him. He's too familiar. Why, we remember him as a boy, how he used to run around here and get into mischief, how we played with him as children, or how our children played with him when they were all young. He wasn't anything special then. Why should we think he's anything special now? This is the curse of the familiar. But in this case, it is even more than that. It appears from the text that not only were the people hostile to him, but that Jesus was actually unable to do any deeds of power because of their hostility, their unbelief. Is that true? Was Jesus rendered powerless by virtue of their lack of faith? Well, yes and no. It's an interesting question with wide-ranging implications. In an absolute sense, of course Christ retains the power to do whatever he pleases. Our actions in no way rob him of his power. An expert is an expert regardless of whether they're from 500 miles away or live just next door. Same person, same capabilities. The only difference is that we assume that the person we know cannot possibly be a subject matter expert. After all, we see them take out their trash in the morning just like we do. They are known, familiar, ordinary. Jesus, though, retains his power whether we think of him as that brat we grew up next to or first get to know him as a great religious figure. Same Jesus, same capabilities. So no, Jesus was not rendered powerless by their unbelief. But at the same time, and without in any way depriving Christ of his power, God has left us with the freedom to respond or not to respond to God's gracious actions, including the things that Jesus does. It is God's choice to give us our choice. God could just as easily deprive us of that choice, but that would render our response to God not a matter of faith and gratitude, but of blind necessity. And what Jesus wants is our free devotion, not an automated response. You know, sometimes I wonder if our familiarity with Jesus renders us unable to receive his gifts of power and grace. We like to sing that hymn, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus," but when he becomes so familiar that he is little more than our buddy, we can no longer see his power and majesty. I wonder sometimes, because it's great when Jesus fulfills our expectations, but when he offers his grace and mercy and power to the wrong sorts, we sometimes get our noses bent out of joint. Like I say, I wonder sometimes. Tomorrow, a gruesome story. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.